And we're live for the second time today. Have a little bit of a different camera setup if y'all can't notice, a little bit of an angle, but we're testing something new. So as of 7 minutes ago, it was reported that 100 ballistic missiles were shot from Iran at Israel. They're currently underway. There are reports of a building in Tel Aviv that has been hit already. No injuries are reported, but things seem to be escalating. I don't know how long I'll stream now. I did 3 hours this morning. Maybe we'll do 30 minutes to an hour now, but just wanted to give some updates as things on the ground are escalating. It is very likely that there will be some sirens soon, but we will deal with that as they come along. Those viewing, let me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if somebody wants to hop on the stream, let me know. We can turn this into a call-in show. I'll drop a link. We'll do a little Q&A. I'll drop a link if anybody wants to join. Maybe we'll get some of the Discord crew here as well. The alert report. So it's interesting. Let me show you all. I don't have the app that does the reports because, frankly, I'm just not interested. What I'm going to tell you is not what I'm suggesting others do. Everybody should take their own risk assessment. But I don't go to the shelter. It's as a national policy, it certainly saves lives. But assessing your individual risk, the chance of something happening to you from one of these rockets is pretty close to zero. So I take the chances, and the app is irrelevant to me. But there's an app that notifies, but they do have a way. Israel can send you a notification straight to your phone, even if you don't have the app. So it disappeared. I wanted to show you all, but it's like, boom, emergency notification. So they sent one out like 15 minutes ago. But yeah, nothing since then. So we'll see. Andy Martin is asking, is Tel Aviv under attack? So yeah, there was one attack. There was a building hit in Tel Aviv. No injuries reported, thankfully. Let's see. Let's see what they're saying. Sirens triggered across Israel as dozens of Iranian missiles said heading towards the country. Updated 1 minute ago. Israel is ordered to bomb shelters. And then Haneg, is that the new? Hold on, I just don't want to seem like an idiot here giving me information. Yeah, okay. Who is Tzachi Hanegbi? Israel? Is he the new? Okay, Hanegbi. Okay, member of Likud, member of the cabinet. He says military force alone can't destroy Iran's nuke program. Only Trump can compel Iran to abandon it. Iran's political leaders won't be targeted. Houthi missile. Wait, Iran's political leaders. So just they're saying military leaders. So this is interesting that they're now acknowledging that they can't even do it on their own. But so then you need to understand the risk, because, and this is something I've been arguing with people all day about. There's big misconception. People are under the impression that Iran has been racing towards building a nuke for decades and they're just inching closer, but there's really no basis for that. They have the capabilities to build a nuke had they want to. We saw that India got one in the 70s. We saw that Pakistan, Iraq almost had one in the early 80s. Israel destroyed that. Pakistan got one in the 90s. The idea that Iran, with all that they have, they're a very educated population and they're immensely wealthy. The only reason they currently don't have nukes is a decision not to have them. Now, after Israel attacked their nuclear facility in 2021, they, in response, started enriching uranium to 60%. It needs to be enriched to 90% for nuclear weapons, but even 60% has no civilian use for. So this was essentially them saying, if you're going to attack our facilities, we're going to move closer to having nuclear capabilities. So people are just convinced that they were about to build a nuke. The only evidence we have of this is Israel saying so, and now Israel attacked them, and now they're not going to build a nuke. But in my opinion, that's just not grounded in reality. Truth is, the chance of them deciding to build a nuke now is greater than it was yesterday. If Iran had a nuke, they likely wouldn't have been attacked. Oh, sirens, you hear that? All right, I'm gonna take this outside to see if potentially we can see some sirens. So I'll take you guys with me. Can you all hear them? I think that the audio is coming from here, so let's bring the audio. Oh, that was short-lived. This is the Galilee at night. Okay, so that was it was pretty distanced. I don't know where, maybe, where did it come from? Did y'all hear that? It seems so quiet and peaceful, right? Can you all see in the distance? I wonder if you could see that. Do you see the cross? Very hard to see. There's a giant cross. That's a Christian Palestinian town over there. Anyways, that was a little siren experience. Not so eventful, but I guess we're about to get a news report as to what area it was shot at. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I mean the fastest way. That's the quickest report on sirens you'll get. Seeing it live. Let's see. What are they reporting now? 16 says remain in shelters as second barrage of Iranian missiles en route. Okay. 7 reported impacts in Tel Aviv area. Several Israelis injured okay, so there have been injuries. Yeah, this is what Netanyahu decided to bring upon us. This is what he decided is important. Only to potentially destroy their non-existent attempt to build nuclear weapons, only to increase their attempt to build nuclear weapons. It's kind of crazy if you think about it. I do have a good Iranian friend. Hold on. I want to see if he'll join me for this stream. Jeff Hirsch, doesn't Israel kind of have their hands full at the moment? Well, yeah, you would think, but that's not how Netanyahu functions. For him, it's how can I get as many decisive victories as possible so I can remain in power? I think that's how he's. Well, I actually just heard a boom in the background. So there was seemingly an interception. I imagine that was an interception we just heard. Yeah, Netanyahu cares about his self-preservation more than anything else, and I imagine his legacy. So he still has not come back from his massive failure of October 7th, and he's going to keep trying to get these wins until that happens. He's not able to defeat Hamas, and so he needs to defeat someone else, you know? Okay, my Iranian friend is scared that his green card is going to get revoked. He's in America now. That's Trump's America that he doesn't want to talk. Oh, okay, well, Let's see what else we're getting reports of. Yep, direct hit in Tel Aviv. It's so interesting. I mean, I don't think this is exclusive to like, Israelis or Jews. I imagine all people have something similar when they're so ideologically driven, but you have this little complex where we could preemptively strike Iran and these people are going to cheer it on. And then when there's a retaliation, they play victim. They're like, oh no, we're under attack. And like, it's like, bro, you can't have it both ways. You can't be a warmonger and rejoice at violence and then be a victim when that violence comes back to you. Like, no one's buying this shit. It's interesting how it almost seems like, for whatever reason, those leading the Hasbara space all lack emotional intelligence. I'm not even commenting on their intelligence. I think they all are quite intelligent people, but like their emotional intelligence is on the floor. Like it's sad, and it gives this perception, right? It's like a lot of people don't live in areas where there's a lot of Jews. So the Jews they meet online. So which Jews are they seeing? They're seeing like Shmuley Boteach. They're seeing these people cheering on the bloodshed in Gaza. They're seeing these people spread misinformation. It creates a certain depiction of Jews, and like one way to look at it, because when I say this, I know people get offended as if I'm like blaming Jews for the hate we get, but that's not what it's about. It's just acknowledging what conditions, what experiences people have that lead them to certain conclusions. So if you don't know any Muslims and the only Muslims you meet are online and they're just extremists calling for violence, that's going to contribute to Islamophobia, and that shouldn't even be a controversial statement, So for whatever reason, the Jews that are leading the Hasbara space, I mean, cringe is one way to put it. Sensing, do you think the intel leak had anything to do with the timing, or was this inevitable? What intel leak are you referring to? I think that what had something to do with it was the negotiations with the U.S. trying to derail that. I think there's another interception I just heard. Although you'd think an interception should come with the siren, but it sounds quite far, so maybe not. I think if Trump closes a deal with Iran, it closes Israel's window to do anything about it, and I don't think that would look good for Netanyahu if there's some deal in place. Oh, Sen, I actually have not seen that. Can you send a link? I'm happy to review it here. By the way, this water bottle, they're not an official sponsor, but Naglene, it comes with like a built-in filter that filters pretty much everything. So if you don't want those microplastics, which we now know do cause harm, they affect hormone levels and some other shit. This takes out all microplastics of water. So get you that Naglene bottle. Super Kripke says, stay safe, buddy. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's funny. I stream this to a few platforms, and Twitch is like one that I've never invested any time in, but we always have one viewer in Twitch, and I wonder if it's the same person. So hi there again, Twitch viewer. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well. Insane. Supercry says insane that all Western media called Israel's attacks preemptive. It was premeditated and unprovoked terrorism. Yeah, well, you know how it works. It's only terrorism if it's a Muslim doing it. It's if you have an army, then it's not terrorism. It's war. That's how it works, right? Like the those with power define the rules of war in their favor very clearly. This has been done for forever. It's a very common colonialist concept, but I imagine it's a concept that was done prior. Like one clear example is one of the people that were killed in Israel's strike was an Iranian scientist, and I mean, a scientist was killed in his home with his family and children. We have no evidence that this scientist was working on creating nuclear weapons. Nuclear scientists have many roles, many civilian roles. Could you imagine if Iran struck a scientist in their home and killed them and their family? And even if they're like, yeah, well, they were working on some technology that might be used for weapons, that wouldn't be acceptable. That would be considered terrorism, and rightfully so. And the West very much would consider that to be an unacceptable attack and terrorism. But when Israel does it, it's like, oh, look at they're brave. Look at that attack. They cheer them on. But this is our war, right? This is our ideological battle to fight. We need to create a system where this is just unacceptable. And those cheering on death and destruction on all sides should be held accountable. Not held accountable with any physical violence towards them, but there should be reputational accountability. Like people who are cheering on the destruction of Gaza, the atrocities being committed, make it seem like, you know, casting doubt on the numbers and the atrocities we're seeing. Yeah, there should be accountability. Their reputation should take a toll. They shouldn't be seen as serious commentators, and the media outlets that keep platforming them also. They should hear from the masses that that's unacceptable. This is our work to do. This is our war to fight. We actually don't know how close Iran is to a nuclear weapon. If it's actually true that they're close, then it is preemptive and justified. Well, based on what we know, and US intel has actually been saying this for a long time, the only reason Iran doesn't have a nuke is their decision not to create one. This whole idea, and I started the stream with this whole idea that they've been trying and they just don't have one because they haven't succeeded yet, that's just not, there's no basis for that. The only basis we currently have of them being close to a nuke is Israel said so. But Netanyahu has been saying this since the 90s. This isn't new. And if they're actually attempting to build a nuke, the idea that this attack is what's going to stop them, no, this will I don't want to say speed up the process, might delay the process, but it will increase their will. The reason they currently don't have a nuke is lack of will, not lack of capabilities. So we've hindered their capabilities, but likely increased their will. The same way they started enriching uranium to 60% after Israel attacked them in 2021. Why do they? I don't think they didn't outright reject the Trump deal. There's actual ongoing negotiations. I'm not. Look. I feel like I have no love for the Ayatollah. I would love to see that regime cease to exist the same way I would love to see Hamas cease to exist. And I find myself constantly defending these fundamentalist governments that I have no love for whatsoever. And it's not even a defense for them, it's a defense for truth. We live in the West where we're constantly lied to about our enemies. Doesn't mean our enemies are good, but often what they say about them is exaggerated. So me coming on the record, I want to make it clear, it's not a defense for them out of a place of having any love for them. I just think we should be honest about what's going on. The Ayatollah are tough negotiators. Let's be clear about that. But we already had a deal with them. The Trump deal, which was signed in the Obama deal, what was it, 2015? And then it was torn up by Trump in 2018 out of spite. And now Trump's trying to get it back. You know? Like the best way to stop Iran from getting a nuke is trying to enter them into the Western world, trying to get them into the U.S. sphere of influence, which the Obama was on the right track. And Trump, credit where credit's due, I believe he had the right idea. to understand that this is not a war that should be fought, not militarily. If we could somehow over time have peace with Iran, that is the best way to ensure they don't pursue nukes. And if they do, don't have any reason to use them. It's not like we're not seeing change. Them and the UAE started warming up to each other. We're literally seeing a Sunni that is allies with Israel and the United States starting to build ties with Iran, a Sunni Shia alliance. To not think that this is significant and a glimmer of hope should give us a glimmer of hope, you know. Is that the right saying, glimmer of hope? Sometimes for whatever reason, I'm just bad at expressions and sayings, idioms and proverbs. I sometimes like confuse both of them. Glimmer, is that it? Glimmer of hope? Anyways. Adam, I'm live streaming if you want to join.
Oh, thanks, dude. I have a call with Giada in 6 minutes.
Okay, so we'll talk later.
All right, see you. Good luck.
Bye. That's Adam, my partner at Head On. Awesome guy. Pakistan King. Pakistan and Iran are friends. Okay, so we have a new follower from Pakistan. Jeff Hirsch is asking, Ador, ever consider politics? I wouldn't say it hasn't crossed my mind, but I don't have all too much of an interest doing that. I also don't think I'm the right kind of person for it. Like, even the way I express ideas is not the style they look for in politics. They look for those like little sound bites and make your point in one sentence, and it's a lot of sophistry. I don't know if that's the format where I thrive the most in. You know, we often see these politicians who seem to be better than the pack, and for whatever reason they don't do well. Like one example, and I'm not saying there's no critique of this person, but Andrew Yang, I think, very much stood out in the Democratic primaries when he ran, and no one was even interested in him. They were interested in Biden, you know? So if you look at who Americans elect, let's talk American politics. If you look at who Americans elect, I don't see how I fit that mold at all. Maybe a very local level. Now, when it comes to Israeli politics, my views are so fringe. I don't know who would take me seriously, you know? Maybe I could find a place in like the Arab left. There's like a coalition, the left wing with the Arabs. Maybe there, honestly. I'll think about it. We'll see. Okay, I'm getting word glimmer of hope is fine. Cool. All right, we got a bunch of questions. Let's see. Mute says horrible things to go through. Love from Aman. Thank you, Mute. This is Mute. I'm guessing this is Mutinous. So Mutinous, you're the one who actually recommended Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem. That's a podcast by Daryl Cooper, which thanks for the recommendation. It's absolutely brilliant. Whoever hasn't listened and is interested, I suggested it's like a 25-hour podcast, but it's so informative. And this was prior to Daryl Cooper becoming super controversial with his seemingly World War II revisionism, and some would describe Nazi apologist. He's a fascinating guy that I don't know what to make of. Like, on one hand, he plays around with some Nazi stuff, it seems, but then he'll do things that are so uncharacteristic for Nazis. I don't know what to make of the guy. Like in Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem, in the first chapter, he describes the Jewish struggle in Europe in such clear terms that it really fosters empathy for early Zionists in a way that I've never heard anybody else do. And then he came out in defense of like the Talmud and attacks against Jews because of the Talmud. I mean, these are not Nazi characteristics, but then he'll also say some other cringe stuff about, like, I don't know, there's been some tweets that seem not Nazi sympathetic, like, so I don't know what to make of the guy. I think that I'll wait for, he's going to do a new podcast on World War II. I think that should give us the information we need about if he's a Nazi or not. But based on Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem, I don't see any world where that podcast doesn't explain how horrific the Holocaust was, right? That seems to, if you know his podcast style, that seems to be certain. But I guess we'll see. We should get him on a program one day. That Tiger says, and by the way, guys, feel free to throw in some super chats if y'all want to, because I do see that the comments, there's a lot of comments and I won't be able to get to them, so that will help prioritize. Also, any super chat just gets reinvested into the channel. I pay a guy to help do clips of the longer videos. What's the public sentiment from the Israeli public? Do you think most people are in favor of striking Iran? Yeah. Israel is a very militant society, and most Israelis believe that the way towards peace is through force. Israelis have been told for decades now that Iran poses an existential threat, and Iran does say Israel's a cancer that should be wiped off the face of the earth. So, the concern Israelis have of a regime like Iran saying that Israel is a cancer, you could see why Israelis will not want Iran to have nuclear weapons. So they do see this as a step in the right direction. They're cheering it on for the most part. I'm not sure what the sentiment is amongst Arab Israelis, who make up 20% of the population, right? So they almost always are more sympathetic towards the Palestinians. They are Palestinian, right? Most of them, in Israeli society, we call them Israeli Arabs, but most do have some Palestinian identity. So the polling always shows them as far more sympathetic to Palestinians, understandably so. So I imagine they're not as supportive of this attack, but this is not a question of sympathy for Palestinians. This is sympathy for Iran, who are Shia and not Arabs. So I don't know. I wonder how they feel about that. We actually have a new community member. Also those who aren't in our Discord yet, y'all should definitely join. We have this awesome Discord. There's conversations every day. There's even a conversation happening right now. We got like 12 people in a voice channel. So we just had a Israeli Arab join. It'd be cool to see if he would want to join us one time. Let me message this new guy and see if he'd want to hop on for a stream. Hold on. Cool. I just asked him. Maybe he'll join us. Yes, since saying you feel that if Iran had one, Israel wouldn't have launched an attack. I mean, that's really why the idea that this reduces nuclear proliferation, I don't think there's a strong case. I think it increases it. I think the chance of unless this causes regime change, which is unlikely, the chance of Iran attaining nuclear weapons over the next few years increases significantly, in my opinion. Glimmer of hope is fine. Yeah. Fafullah with some commendable self-reflection, saying maybe I'm acting out of emotional stupidity, but Iran attacks Israel all the time through proxies. It was about time they feel the heat of what they've caused directly. I mean, it's not like there are no consequences for what Iran does. Iran is like heavily sanctioned by the West. Israel has done multiple attacks on them in the past years, assassinating their scientists, attacking their facilities. So it's not like Israel's just been sitting idly doing nothing to Iran, and then they've just been attacking them through proxies, you know? So I don't think it's that simple. Isar Ahmad is saying, where are you from? I am Israeli American. What do you think of Mamdani running for New York election? So yeah, I see a lot of people making noise. I don't know all too much about him. I don't know his views. I imagine, based on what I'm seeing, that he's not nearly as dangerous or extreme as many are making it out to be. He's probably not an extremist. And the fact that they keep pressing him on Israel, like, shut the fuck up. He's literally running for mayor of New York. You could ask him about his views on Jews living in New York, about problems they're facing and how we would solve them. All this is super relevant, right? If you think he might be anti-Semitic for whatever reason, ask him about that. See his thoughts on the Jews, see his thoughts on his constituents and how he plans to serve them. The mayor of New York, how he feels about Israel is absolutely irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Dave Pendre says, every time you get into Israeli parliament, they'd only drag you away every time you speak. Yeah, I don't know. Imagination Scene, thank you for the super chat, €5. Saying, this podcast is pretty interesting too. Cam and Ray's Cold War podcast. Okay, cool. Thanks for the suggestion and really appreciate the super chat. Wait, Isar Ahmad, you're saying, what about Palestine? Say the truth, you are telling a lie. Can you let me know what that's in reference to? No, stop telling a lie. Be aware, everyone. What's the lie? You're also welcome to come on stream and make your case if you're interested. Israeli genociders. You follow your rabbis, not God. Who are you talking to, my guy? Israeli genociders massacred 20,000 kids. The reported number is around 16,000. But yeah, it's absolutely horrific and unjustifiable. The highest rate of children being killed of any conflict in the 21st century by far, from violent deaths at least. You have like a famine in Sudan that has killed similar rate for malnutrition, but violent deaths, this is like nothing's come close. You need to go back to the Rwanda genocide of 1994 to find a similar, not similar, something worse and significantly worse. But no, this is not normal operation what Israel's doing. Fafo Law says, true, but sanctions affect people mostly, not leaders. Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying sanctions are effective, but this whole idea that there's no consequences and that they're just getting away with it, I think the opposite. I think we need to invite them in. We need to try to bring them into the Western world. People seem to think it's impossible, that they're fundamentalists. I'm not convinced. I mean, fucking Al-Julani, Al-Shara, right? He's running Syria now. He's trying to get legitimacy from the West. He's literally was the leader of Al-Nusra, which was a Al-Qaeda faction. They're considered more extreme than Al-Qaeda. It's just a long history of terrorists turning statesmen. You know, we see it time and time again. I don't think, and is Iran so much worse than Saudi Arabia? Or is it that one's our ally and the other isn't? What makes Iran so much worse than Saudi Arabia? And maybe they are, but I have not been compelled. I've not heard a strong case, but one's an ally, the other isn't. So APAC Jews. Freedom says APAC Jews. Okay. I don't know what you're talking about, but cool. Chosen people chosen to do genocide. Look, Freedom, I got to tell you something. I see that you are holding a lot of hate in your heart. And first of all, I'm sorry. Sorry that whatever happened in life led you there. And I know it's hard to see the Jewish state commit such an atrocity and have this be supported by the majority of Jews. I get it. But when you just fuel the hate, all this does is make Jews feel like they need Israel more. It makes them more closed off to hearing other perspectives. And it makes the world more divided. So I would urge you to, instead of just painting a broad brush and hating a whole group, try to build bridges. Try to get to know a Jew and see the world from their eyes. And you're not going to agree with them on everything, but that's the way forward. Build these bridges. Got to build these bridges, my guy. Paul Tosland, Al-Julani is just a terrorist in a suit. That's all that's changed. Right, but what's Netanyahu? You know? Is Bush not a terrorist in a suit? Bush killed a lot more people than Al-Julani. He's a terrorist because, he's Muslim and, he didn't kill people with a mighty Western military. But why is he worse than Bush? Watt is saying, did you make it to shelter? No, I was saying earlier, Watt, I don't go to the shelter. And I'm not telling other people not to go to shelter. Everyone should do their own risk analysis, but it's a good national policy because when everybody goes to shelters, lives are saved. But if you're assessing your risk as an individual, the chance of something happening from one of these strikes is close to zero. So I don't go to shelter. In fact, when there was a siren, I brought the stream outside to try to see if we could see some interceptions or something. They were elected, Giuliani elected himself. Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between a democracy and whatever Syria is currently going through. But just because you're elected doesn't mean you are by default more moral, right? Like Hitler was also elected, right? That shouldn't be the only way we judge somebody's level of morality or value or however you want to frame it. Joe Wilder's asking, do you think Iranian public would like to see the Ayatollah go and turn? Yeah, I mean, certainly the younger generation, they seem very secular and much more progressive, and they would love regime change. So yeah, I think that's the case. And we should get an Iranian on. I did message my friend, but he's afraid that he'll get his green card revoked. Have friends in Netanyahu has looked chaotic all around. Oh, have friends in Netanya, but mostly Tel Aviv. Yeah, let's see if there's any updates because we do know there were some injuries. Remain in shelter. Okay. Second barrage. U.S. reportedly assisting Israel in intercepting missiles. Israeli official says Iran will pay unbearable price for. Right. So this is how you do it. You do a preemptive strike. And then they attack and they say unbearable price. But what did Israel expect? That there'd be no retaliation? They are saying on civilian areas. So if it was only military areas, but you do have some bases in the desert and stuff, but a lot of like the intelligence bases and the bases that deal with logistics and all that stuff, they're in city centers, so you could, the Kiryat is like the main administrative base. That's where the generals sit. If you shoot that, you're shooting at Tel Aviv, So what are you saying? You're not allowed to shoot our base because it's in Tel Aviv? Okay, well then Israel can't drop any bombs on Gaza because it's all a city center, Yeah, Giuliani did kill less people than Assad, that's for sure. Yeah, imagination soon saying that. Have I met any Iranian Jews in Israel? Yeah. There's definitely Persian Jews here. What's the percentage? There's a pretty big Persian population. Let's see, what percent of Israel are Persian Jews? There's a Persian restaurant in Tel Aviv that I go to sometimes. Oh, not much. They're 1.5 to 2% of the population, but that's around 200,000. Wait, no, that math is not mathing at all. Israeli Jews of, oh yeah, okay. Recent 200,000. Okay, yeah, that does math. My bad. It's past 10 p.m. on a Friday, you know. So Persian Jews account for 3 to 4% of the Jewish population, but only 1.5 to 2% of the total population. This is ChatGPT, but these are the types of things they generally get right, just basic pulling of data from the internet. Yeah, so there is this Persian restaurant in Tel Aviv I go to, and they have the old flag with the lion on it, the pre-Ayatollah flag. So those are the ones I've met, but yeah, once in a while you meet what you call a Parsi. That's how you say Persian. Oh, that makes sense. Parsi. What language do Persians speak? Farsi. Farsi, right? Parsi, Farsi. And I imagine, what do Iranians call themselves in Iran? Is it Parsi also? The videos right now of Tel Aviv look pretty wild. Yeah, let's try to pull those up. Actually, let's review what's going on. Yeah, Alon, I see you're asking if everybody I know is okay. From what I know so far, I mean, I do have a father and brother in Tel Aviv area. I haven't heard anything from them yet, but yeah, I imagine they're okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this is from Tel Aviv. Share screen. Let's see. What? Why is the video not working? Oh, it popped up here. Okay, that's a bad user experience. Wait, am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay, no audio. Let's see. Looks like an Iron Dome interceptor missile. It's falling. Boom. Ooh. Oh, this is just them playing it in reverse and re-showing it. So this is the impact. Oh, there's one back there, and then another one here. Oh, I mean that's. I'll tell you though, that building is that's like an office building. It doesn't seem to be a residential building. So Friday night, there's not likely to be a lot of people there. Thankfully. Oh wait, I didn't even have that. I wasn't even showing that. Sorry, guys. Okay, look. Boom. Boom. And before this falls, you see another one in the background. You see right here. There's one coming down here that falls. Boom, boom. And then these are the interceptions. You can see the interceptions. I don't think this is Iron Dome because ballistic missiles are intercepted by the arrow. But this is, look in this area, you'll see them. Yeah, boom. And these are office building area. So hopefully everything's okay. There are some injuries, hopefully nothing serious. Hubert, the chosen one, says, what about Aaron Rodgers signing with the Steelers? Oh, I haven't followed football in so many years. Didn't he start with the Steelers? Isn't that where he started? Yeah, Oh, no. That was Ben Roethlisberger. Okay. Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers, was it? He came in for Brett Favre. Is that what it was? And he just killed it the first year? Yeah, that was Aaron Rodgers. He's still playing. Okay. Is he still good? Is he still killing it? I know he's considered one of the GOATs, from what I understood. There's a difference between having a military building in a city and using civilian infrastructure for military purposes. Look, I do agree with that. But But for the sake of the argument we were making before, Israel was saying we're going to strike back very hard because you shot it at city centers. But so they're essentially saying the entire city center is a no-go, but there's military bases there. So there's a difference. But I will also say Hamas's use of civilian infrastructures is highly, highly over-exaggerated in a very significant ways. And I'll tell you how we know this. I mean, every single unit in Gaza has a GoPro, or almost all units have GoPros. We see very little video and photo evidence of utilization of civilian infrastructure. You'll see the utilization of civilian infrastructure once it's evacuated, but most of their infrastructure is underground, and the reason for this is simple. Why would you put infrastructure above ground when you can put it below ground? It's safer below ground, right? So a lot of these reports we hear, every other home, that like Douglas Murray with all his bullshit propaganda, that's never been proven. And another thing we always hear, often hear, and I know some people are going to be surprised hearing this, but the only proof we have of Hamas using hospitals is Israel saying so and these edited videos that they show. There's no evidence of them using hospitals for military purposes. There's not a single reported attack launched from a hospital. And I know people hearing there's like, no way, that can't be the case. Look it up. Find me evidence. And if you're confident enough, you come on stream and let's talk about it. Fafo, I'm not saying this just to you. I'm just in general putting this out there. But their use of civilian infrastructure, it's not that they don't use it. I'll tell you the main way they use it. Let's say areas are evacuated. They might use buildings to launch surprise attacks on the IDF. And the tunnels, there's a tunnel city under Gaza. So there's exits in places. So some of these exits are civilian buildings. So that is the usage we're seeing. But there's this like caricature, this idea that the Hasbaristas try to paint, and it's this, there's like a family eating dinner, and then Hamas is like shooting a rocket out of, or an RPG out of the building, hoping that the IDF strikes back and kills the family eating dinner. There's like no basis for that at all. None whatsoever. Watt says, my hope Iran is just trying to save face and won't escalate further, but I'm not so optimistic. Yeah, I mean, this is in line with what they did last time, right? They needed to save face, but they didn't want to escalate. I think that was probably... but now they've taken it to new levels. You know, I don't know if that's still how they're... like, shit is escalated now. This isn't the same as last time, but based on what we've seen, they are showing they have shown restraint. They try to save face. They do this attack that it's a great spectacle. It's grandiose. It looks powerful, but it does minimal damage. That's kind of been their thing. Right? Like shooting hundreds of drones, but saying they're shooting them so Western powers could be prepared to shoot them down. The ballistic missiles was a step up, which they did. You know, they hit a few dozen ballistic missiles, but again, there was only one civilian killed, and that was a Palestinian civilian. But yeah, hopefully they are still in the same way going to show restraint. Casper Flux says, where do you live? I spend my time between places, but half the year I'm living in Israel. Currently, I'm in the Galilee, in the Western Galilee in the north, which is really one of the best places of in all the land. Okay, still good, but he's 41 about Aaron Rodgers. Cool, good to know. Damn, playing at 41. IDF actually uses human shields. Yeah, their IDF does use Palestinian human shields. This we know. They've done it in the West Bank, and we've had some pretty harrowing reports out of Gaza of what they've done with human shields. I mean, one of the reports is pretty significant because it describes this 70-something-year-old man who for hours was used as a human shield. He was meant to go into homes to see if they're booby-trapped. He did this for hours. They finally released him. As he was leaving, he was shot dead by another unit. The reason this is significant is because it's two war crimes in one report by two units next to one another. It signifies the prevalence of such war crimes, of civilians being shot for just being in the wrong area, and then also use of human shields. Muhammad Mahdi says, do you think a war will happen between Israel and Iran? I guess it depends how we define war, you know. Supposedly, didn't Iran say they're going to officially declare war on Israel? Yeah, what would a war look like? It'll probably be just a series of missiles, airstrikes. There could be this like war of attrition, and it's interesting how long Iran would want to put up with it, because Israel certainly has more capabilities to hit Iran than vice versa. Because they not only have like surface to surface missiles, they could also hit them from the sea to some capacity. I'm doing this. I'm streaming. All good?
I want to take the pad out of the mama.
You could do it. You can go. Yeah. You want to say hi? You want to say hi to the stream, guys? This is my mom. She lives next door, and this is Elliot, her lover. They're getting some stuff out of my bomb shelter to take it to theirs, because they're using it. Yeah, that mattress has just been taking unnecessary space anyways. So yeah, where were we? War. This kind of like, Israel does have greater capabilities, but like Iran doesn't even need to go full out. They could decide to have a policy where they're just going to shoot one rocket a day at central Israel, and I mean that'll seriously affect Israel's economy. Already, you know, Israel has huge tourism in the summer. This preemptive strike has already affected Israel's economy, because you need to, like, a lot of people make summer plans. Some of them were planning on coming to Israel. There's people canceling their plans now, you know. Sen says command center equals man with a phone, and David says IDF would have us believe they have dozens of command centers. Yeah, I mean they do. They're just these underground tunnel networks. They're not in hospitals. What you could say? Hold on. So what about the tunnels under Al Shifa? Yeah. Okay. So Fafo, this I'm so happy you asked this, because this demonstrates exactly what I was saying. So they didn't show there's tunnels under Al Shifa. That was an edited video. But when you look at it, there is a tunnel adjacent to Al Shifa. So this we know to be true. There's a tunnel city under Gaza, and it's plausible that all, if not all, most hospitals in Gaza have tunnels in their vicinity, because combatants go to the hospitals when they're injured. So it's a good strategy for them, for tunnels leading to hospitals. This is not the same, though, as hospital being utilized for military purposes. So no, there was never shown to be anything substantial under Al Shifa. Now, Muhammad Sinwar, this was another example. That bombing that they said they bombed a hospital, that wasn't a hospital. That was a block or two away. It was near a hospital, but a block or two away. And yeah, he was killed there. And then they showed a video that was cut showing the hospital and then that tunnel. So that's what Israel does. They've never shown. And look, there's some things that it's very easy to prove, you know. Literally, don't edit a video, show somebody holding a camera, going in a hospital, showing the use of whatever infrastructure there's being used. That has never, ever been done. So when you have such a big claim like the utilization of hospitals for military purposes, and it's as easy to prove as filming it, and it hasn't been done, it should be pretty obvious why, you know. So those are two very good examples that are still cited. They're part of our collective consciousness. It's part of our knowledge. Very, very much used against Hamas, Al Shifa, European hospital. But no, there's tunnels adjacent. Sinwar was not killed below Al Shifa. He was killed a block or two away, and that's just the MO, you know. So Fafa says, Hamas literally uses civilian infrastructure all the time, even when they're underground. The tunnels, okay, so yeah. The tunnels are under civilian areas, for sure. For sure. But let's think about this. Let's say Hamas needs to build some military capabilities against Israel. Okay? Any base they build above ground will instantly be destroyed. The best way for them to build infrastructure that Israel can't get to is underground. And if you then say, oh, it's underground, therefore everything above it is fair game, then you're creating rules of engagement that don't allow them to fight. You're essentially saying, no, you need to have things above ground. You don't have an air force, so we're just going to bomb the shit out of it. If it's underground, then we're just going to kill the civilians above it. You can't create these rules of engagement where one side is just not allowed to fight you. The best way for Hamas to fight Israel and not involve civilians, if you think about it, is actually building this tunnel city. The tunnel city separates them from the civilian population, but it's very hard to fight people in these tunnels. Israel has no intention to take that risk upon their own soldiers. So instead of dealing with these tunnels, going in there and having some tunnel warfare, and I understand why we have no interest in doing that, but instead we're just collapsing civilian infrastructure on top of these tunnels, but with the civilian population inside. John Mearsheimer seems sure big war is coming and American against running. Okay, interesting. I hear the name John a long time. I know he's had some interesting analyses. I don't know what the accuracy of a lot of his analyses has been, but you can see. Yeah, so again, Fafo, he didn't hide under a hospital. There was never demonstrated that he hid under a hospital. It was a few blocks away. Yeah, okay, Imagination Scene, thanks for clearing that up. Muhammad Mahdi, thanks for the compliment. I appreciate that. Attacking tunnels equals attacking hostages too. Yeah, this is true. We actually know this to be true. A report came out in Israeli media saying Israel is already admitting to killing 20 hostages in airstrikes. This is not including B-bus, which were almost certainly also killed in airstrikes, which Israel does not admit, but that almost certainly is the case. And a lot of the hostages that have been released say that their biggest fear was dying in an airstrike. Some of the ones who lived were almost killed, like Noah Argamani, for example, who had a building collapse on her. Whistleblower reports told us that after October 7th, Israel was striking the homes of hostage takers, even if they thought there might be hostages with them, which is quite controversial. Well, so Fafula, you're saying, I'm not saying that everything is fair game, proportionality is important, but just because they're weak doesn't mean they get to hide under civilians, and now the IDF can't do anything. Yeah, no, I agree. Do proper evacuations. If you actually want to fight Hamas, evacuate Gazans and then deal with it. And yeah, proportionality is still important. Let's talk proportionality. Anywhere from 3 to 6% of the civilian population in Gaza is dead, and Hamas is still in power. I don't think there's ever been such a horrific proportionality in the past 100 years, where you have such a high percentage of the civilian population killed without the enemy you're trying to, and the enemy you're trying to kill has numbers similar to prior to October 7th. I mean, there's no, like, the proportionality case here. I don't see one for it. This amount of damage to civilians and civilian infrastructure for this little military gain, unheard of, unless you're talking about things we widely agree to be genocides, and that's why a lot of people are describing this as a genocide, and I think there's a strong case to be made. Right, like if you want to describe what Israel's doing as a war, then they stand alone in how horrific it's being run. If you want to call it a genocide, well, there's been worse genocides, but there's also been genocides that, like, if you look at what academics have described as genocide in the 21st century, Gaza is worse than some of them. So this isn't even like mild for genocides compared to some others. If they evacuate Gazans, they get accused of ethnic cleansing. So yeah, but this isn't about accusations, right? This is about doing what's right. It's better to get accused of ethnic cleansing than killing them. Now, it's not ethnic cleansing if you allow them to come back. And one of the ways to ensure they come back is to not kick them out of their land. It's to let them evacuate. You could build like a massive refugee camp in the Negev, which is the desert in the south. Let them into Israel proper. Women, children, and elderly. Have military-age men do background checks. Have this be a process that takes many months. In the meantime, you are putting pressure on Hamas because you're taking away their power because you're taking away their people. And if you don't want to deal with evacuating them into your territory, then you need to work with the international community and find a solution, but you need to guarantee that they can return. Because the lack of guarantee that they could return is why countries don't want to take them, because every time Palestinians have left, they have not returned. There's a pretty consistent track record of that. Yeah, and letting them in Israel allows Israel to show a different side. Like the only thing Gazans know about us is what they're taught by Hamas and what they've experienced firsthand. And even if Hamas has taught them nothing bad about us, they experience us through our bombs being dropped on them and their families. If you let them in, start giving them food, educate them, show them compassion, you start to show them that we're in fact humans and not evil. They're taught in their schools that we're evil, and we reinforce that teachings with our actions. So Misha Post is considering there are tunnels below civilian infrastructure and you have military experience. How do you recommend Israel fights this war? Sorry if you answered this in the past. Well, first of all, I think we should always recognize that there's non-military solutions that you could engage in. I don't think the world is quite ready for it. I don't think Israel is positioned in such a way. I don't think Netanyahu could have gotten away. Like any leader that didn't take a military route would not stay in power. So I don't think it's feasible, but I do want to put it out there that you don't always need to respond to force with greater force. But if you do want to take a military route, then you do proper evacuations, even if it takes months. You could also be very, very systematic in how you clear out Gaza. So imagine if after October 7th, you do this. You work with the international community to put immense pressure on Hamas to release the hostages and even step down from power. And maybe the only way to do this is by recognition of a Palestinian state from Israel. In that time, you start letting Gazans out. You incentivize them to leave. And this might even require withholding aid. I know this is considered cruel, but if we need to separate Gazans from Hamas, then we might need to stop aid from coming out, but make it very easy for Gazans to come out and get all the food, water, and aid they want. Right? And then you're already not dropping bombs on civilians, and you could deal with Hamas in a very different way. You could also just be much more systematic with, you could create like a buffer zone around Gaza, which is essentially taking land, which is a huge blow to Hamas, taking more land. So you could very systematically increase the border very carefully by evacuating people from those areas first, giving them ample time to evacuate, making sure they evacuate before that places are leveled, and slowly but surely create a larger buffer zone and commit to ending that the moment XYZ is met. Right? There's so many ways to do it. And also, if we want to fight them in their tunnels, that's just way too bloody. But I think we are getting pretty close to having autonomous soldier type things like little drones that could do this tunnel warfare. That's pretty dystopian, but that probably is coming. So that there's all sorts of ways. There's near infinite ways you could go about things. And then other things we could do differently is just change the level of proportionality. We reduced our care for civilian harm to levels that we haven't seen in other conflicts, where it was permissible to drop bombs, kill up to 20 civilians for one low-level commander, and some of the high-level commanders, they got permission to drop bombs and kill triple-digit amounts of civilians. Lots of war crimes from that soldiers were committing. very little accountability. You can not destroy all the civilian infrastructure, right? Currently, more than half the hospitals in Gaza are not operational. When you have the most amount of injured ever in Gaza, you have less hospitals. You have a great reduction in hospitals. Don't destroy over 50% of cropland. Don't unnecessarily destroy civilian infrastructure. You know, it's endless. There's every day we make decisions, and there's just such a low degree of care for civilians. And I'm speaking one person who's a commentator and an analyst and somewhat of a researcher. But imagine if you take the entire military brass, all the bright minds we have, and instead of putting that in how can we be as forceful as possible, you actually come up with this brilliant strategy for how to deal with it while reducing harm. If I could sit here and share all these ideas that nothing I'm saying is far-fetched. It's not pie in the sky. It's all very feasible. Imagine what like an actual coalition of analysts or strategists can do, Aaron Levere says, Ador and Pissa, you could be in Israel knowing all this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you want me to tell you. My entire family lives here. I have parents that are getting older. I have young nieces and nephews. The idea that I will stop seeing them because my government is psychopathic. I don't buy it. Not so, Oedipus. Good luck leaving now. Thanks, Oedipus, for tuning in. And yeah, that's another thing. Like Aaron, we need Ador in Israel. He can convince Zionists. Well, those who are quickest to leave are the most like left wing and the most tolerant. So, I don't think the strategy is just saying leave. You should leave. Why? Just to change the demographics of the country to be more extreme? I'm here having conversations all the time with my fellow Israelis, and I actually do change some minds. Milo Sabri says about the tunnels, yes, Israel cannot create rules of engagement like no tunnels below civilians, but should Israel let Hamas use this as a war advantage because civilians cannot be harmed? Well, no, again, so you just need to do proper evacuations, like real proper evacuations. And again, there's many different ways to go about this. But you need to understand, for Hamas to have some advantage is perfectly acceptable because Israel has the military advantage by unimaginable margins. So for them to get some advantage, like home turf advantage, understandable. I mean, look, every guerrilla warfare in history used some kind of dirty tactics to gain an advantage against a much more powerful entity. This is the norm in guerrilla warfare. The whole point of guerrilla warfare is we cannot fight you. We are not strong enough to fight you through traditional means. So we're going to gain our advantage in another way. This is pretty normal. But when Hamas does it, it's painted as like it must be a result of evil Islamic fundamentalism. No, there are many populations before them did similar things. In fact, the Bar Kokhba revolts. Bar Kokhba led a revolt against Roman rule in the land of Israel in 300 AD? Somewhere around then. They used tunnels to fight the Romans. And Palestinians and Jews are descendants of those people. Well, actually, I imagine Bar Kokhba revolts were more their descendants because we got exiled after that. So we're the descendants of Bar Kokhba. But Bar Kokhba's cousins in the north, a lot of them got to stay, and some of them became Palestinians, But we Jews have used tunnels against the stronger enemy. So, Aaron, you're saying I understand that, but come on now. Look, I think that a difference between myself and many others, and I'm no judgment here, but just recognize this difference. I'm not like I don't do things for like just on principle for the sake of it. I just try to be reasonable and pragmatic. Me being in Israel right now is not contributing to the death and destruction in Gaza. It's not contributing to the occupation. There's no net negative to my existence here in Israel. You could say there's something on principle. I should take a stand and refuse to go. I don't function that. I don't function that way. It's just not important enough to me. That principle is not more important than me being able to spend time with my family, you know? So it's just not, if my existence here was causing people to actually be killed, I would think differently about it, but it's harmless. In fact, I can make the case that it's net positive because I'm here doing reconciliation work with Palestinians and talking to Israelis and changing some minds. So I don't see any way why I should not want to spend time with my family just because Israel bad, you know? Your strategy assumes the average Israeli has empathy for Gaza. No, I don't make that assumption at all. In fact, it's not even an expectation. Nobody has empathy for their enemy. I don't blame Israelis for not empathizing with Palestinians and vice versa. No one's ever empathized with their enemy, not in mass, maybe some individuals of a group, but not the collective. That's why we need international law and some kind of international order and accountability for war crimes, right? Countries are always going to prefer and value the lives of their soldiers over civilians of their enemy nation. And as weapons get more powerful, we saw this after World War II when the Allies were carpet bombing cities. We understood this is not an acceptable form of warfare. You cannot inflict unimaginable pain on civilians just because you're at war with another country. So we passed international law. So I don't expect empathy from Israelis, but I do expect there to be accountability and for the United States not to give Israel a free pass and fund the atrocities being committed. Supercry says, do you have a sense that Israelis are leaving because of the genocide? No, I'm not sure that plays into it. You have both, right? When shit hits the fan, you have some Israelis leave. They're like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to go to Europe or America until shit calms down. But then you have like these Western American Zionists. They're like, oh, we need to go to Israel and support. Or you have like diaspora Israelis that are like, it's time to go back. So it's unclear if Israel has had a decreasing. I don't think the population's gone down since October 7th. Certainly not with birth rate, but even if you exclude birth rate, I don't know if more have left than have come. We could look into it though. Understandable. You think Israel will just let Hamas get away with their advantage if they can prevent it? Well, I wonder what that means, that they have gotten away with their advantage. Israel is having a lot of trouble defeating Hamas. You know, they're doing this sophisticated tunnel warfare. We are dropping a lot of bombs, and they're still somehow existing and recruiting more. And we did a ceasefire. Suddenly, you have thousands of Hamas, as if they've, been in control this whole time. They still control over 50%, around 50% of Gaza. You know, two years of fighting, and Israel only controls 50% of Gaza. It's a massive failure, especially when you consider the toll it's taken on civilian life. And again, if preventing their advantage is committing war crimes, then Israel should not be able to do that. You mean you're not a pseudo professor pretending to be an anti-Zionist while teaching at Ariel like a certain somebody? Who are you referring to? Not so to piss. I have no idea who you're talking about. So about evacuations, and what is the percent responsibility you give Egypt or civilian? I don't know how to put it in percentage, but somewhere in the single digits, because Egypt's not the one dropping bombs, and Israel controls most of the borders as well as the sea. Israel can let them out through their borders, and Israel's the one dropping bombs. And it is possible there would have been a way to get Egypt to agree if you actually worked with the international community and made absolute guarantees that they would be able to return. Right now, there's an attempt to relocate them to Gaza for good. Obviously, Sisi is not going to agree to that, but if there was an actual guarantee and maybe some monetary compensation, I'm not saying it's not impossible, but there was minimal effort. And let's be clear, it's not that there was no effort, but it was minimal. So Sean says Israel's not trying to be reasonable. Israel's trying to win, period. Okay, fine. Cool. Why not nuke Gaza then? Why not just drop a few tactical nukes and just nuke the whole strip? They're just trying to win, period, right? There's no end you could take that logic. I get it. But we can't just do anything we want because we're trying to win. That's like saying, look, I'll give you the same logic. Hamas is not trying to be reasonable. They're trying to win. That's what October 7th was all about, right? Palestinians have a right to resist. That doesn't mean October 7th was an acceptable form of resistance. Israel has a right to self-defense. Doesn't mean the response to October 7th is a reasonable form of self-defense. If Israel can get away with violating international law, it means that they can get away with it and you should have no issue with it. Why should I have no issue with it when a country that I'm a citizen of and a military that I've served in is committing one of the worst atrocities of the 21st century? And as a humanist, and even let's just look at it from a place of self-preservation. A world that does not have institutions and organizations that can protect such an atrocity like Israel's committing is a world that's more dangerous for me and my family to live in. If the world can't stop Israel from doing what they're doing in Gaza, can the world stop someone from doing that to Israel? Even from a self-interested place, I have issue with this, and also from a humanist perspective, I have issue with this, and as an Israeli citizen, I have issue with this. I would say to not have issue with it is what we should be concerned about. Having issue with this should be a very human reaction. Although it should be a human reaction. The human reaction is not to care about your enemy, as I stated. So I would agree that I am in the minority here, but outsiders who don't have skin in the game should care about civilians dying. They don't have an excuse to have this callous indifference towards the death and destruction of civilians. Let's see. Amir Hitsroni. You know, I don't know all too much about him. I don't know all too much about him. Sean, I can't say you have sound logic here. You're saying if you acknowledge that Israel shouldn't care, I'm not saying they shouldn't care. I'm saying they don't care. That's the norm. Countries don't care about other civilians. Then it's all fair play as long as they don't get prosecuted. No, that's a horrific system. That's like saying, why should Nazis care about Jews? And if they don't get prosecuted, there's nothing wrong with it. That's such a depraved moral statement. Like it's A, it's not coherent, and B, if you try to bring some coherence to it, it's morally depraved. I'm not really sure what you're getting at. How much power does Israel have over Egypt's border with Gaza exactly? I mean, right now they control the other side of the border, right? So right now, even if Egypt wanted to let aid in, Israel controls the other side. But in terms of letting Gazans go into Egypt, Israel can't determine that on their own. Egypt would need to allow. Hey, brother, are you safe? I just joined. That's from Fabian. Yeah, thank you, Fabian. I am safe. Let's see. We do have some updates. Israel is told they can leave shelters, but to remain nearby after second Iran missile barrage. 7 injured, 1 moderately. Hanegbi says military force alone can't destroy a nuke program. We read that earlier. PM huddles underground with security chief ministers to discuss response to missile barrage. 2 rescued after being trapped in Tel Aviv area building hit by missile. Interesting. Okay. See what's happening on Twitter. So this is a report. I don't know if I should trust this because it's by Syrian girl, but she's saying Iran shot down the first F-35 in history, flown by a woman, an Israeli. I'm gonna need to corroborate that because that means. Oh yeah, okay. I knew not to trust Syrian girl. This was community noted. This is from 2024 from New Mexico. Fucking Syrian girl, can't trust her. Let's see. Okay, we have another video from Tel Aviv. Okay, let's see what we have here. Wait. Where's this rocket taking off from? What even is happening? Okay, I mean this looks like what would be an interceptor, but to have an interceptor in the middle of the city doesn't make any sense. I've never seen that something's not. Oh, okay. Where is this that there'd be an interceptor right there? And what building is this? I don't even recognize that building. And I don't see how you're going to have an interceptor. They have require a lot of space. There's all this radiation that they put off. Let's screenshot that. That's a fucking hit. Okay, well, I want to see what that building is. It's one of my favorite things about LLMs that you could just drop a screenshot. Okay, ChatGPT, I spoke too soon, cannot identify that building. I have never seen that building in my life. I'm not even sure. Tel Aviv, watch until the end, 42 minutes ago. Okay, don't know what to make of that one. So Sean, acknowledging that Israelis don't care. I'm not saying shouldn't, don't. I'm grappling with reality. People do not care about their enemy. This is human. This is not the same as saying you can kill civilians because you want to. Me being an outlier is true, but it's irrelevant. Just because humans don't what is this logic? So is the Holocaust okay? Is every genocide in history okay? There's no coherence to what you're saying. And I would even, yeah, Sean's logic isn't going through. That's just self-serving talk. There isn't deep engagement with issues here or even engagement. Oh, sorry, Sean. Yeah, come on, bro. You're just wasting valuable time. I think I'm going to stop entertaining what you're saying. He goes, war is not a humanist endeavor, kiddo. It's all tactics, bro. All tactics in the end, not morals. No, we actually have international law for a reason. You can't commit genocide. If it's all tactics, then October 7th is okay. The Holocaust is okay. The Rwanda genocide is okay. You can do whatever the fuck you want. This is how psychopaths think. Amir Hitzroni is hilarious. Only look into him for a good laugh. He's not a great analyst or thinker or very accomplished or educated either, just very funny and racist. Interesting. I know the name. I haven't really looked into him. Okay. Jonathan Buckenheimer says, what do you think the civilian to combatant ratio is? So I've done a few analyses on this. We have 55,000 confirmed deaths. We can know by looking at the demographics that is either entirely civilians or 90+% civilians. Combatants, it seems, are not being reported on this data. So it's hard to know the civilian to combatant ratio because we don't know how many combatants have been killed. We only have Israel's word, but Israel has not shown any evidence of that. And evidence of that could literally be a list of those they've killed, a list of the names. Also, we see how they're reporting it. We've heard from whistleblowers that Israel has these no-go zones that are just kill zones. Anyone in those zones, it's permissible to shoot. They are just counting them as combatants, but we had multiple reports saying we would just shoot people, they'd be unarmed, and they'd be counted as a combatant. We also had another report that there's only 2,500 guns recovered from Gaza. 2,500 guns. Now, a lot of those guns very well may have been found in bundles of dozens or hundreds. And so now those killed very well may have been killed in tunnels and you didn't recover their guns, but then how do we know we killed them? So Israel's estimate of 20 to 30,000 has no basis in reality. It's likely highly exaggerated. We also are not seeing like all GoPro footage of Hamas being killed in interactions with IDF. My estimate of the civilian to combatant ratio is between 4-to-1 and 9-to-1, which comes out to between 80 to 90% civilians, which will be, and if you want to play safe, you could say 70 to 90%, but this also doesn't take into account indirect deaths. Civilian to combatant ratios often don't use indirect deaths. Some do, though. But it's the civilian to combatant ratio is almost certainly the highest in the 21st century, and likely by a significant margin. Right? That's like one of the biggest pieces of propaganda we hear, that the civilian to combatant ratio in urban warfare averages 9-to-1. No basis for that. In fact, you're not going to find a single conflict with 9-to-1 civilian to combatant ratio, let alone many to make that the average. The average in urban warfare is around 2-to-1, and Gaza's likely going to be significantly higher. And by likely, I mean almost certainly. So yeah, I'd say 4-to-1 to 9-to-1. Oh yeah, and another part of the propaganda, they're saying in Israel's doing 1-to-1, the lowest in modern warfare. Again, no basis to the 1-to-1. No one's willing to publicly defend that. People will put shit out online, but they will not. They won't debate it with somebody who actually knows. And that's I know I rehash this point a lot, but the only topic I've never found somebody to discuss or publicly debate is the death toll in Gaza and the civilian to combatant ratio, because those who put out these analyses know it's bullshit, so they're not going to publicly defend it. And those who are just promoting it, they don't know, they're just repeating it, so they don't feel comfortable defending it because they haven't done the research themselves. And then if you're an honest actor and you do the research, you understand that it's not a defensible position. And this is an invitation to anybody out there. If you think you could defend the low civilian to combatant ratio, or that the Ministry of Health has been found fabricating data, come on, let's talk about it, because there's no basis to any of those claims, none. The Gaza Media Office, the GMO, does release data they release claims that are uncorroborated and should not be trusted. Like sometimes we'll hear 70% of those killed have been women and children. This does not come from the Ministry of Health. It comes from the media office. Do not trust the media office. If the Ministry of Health gives a daily report on something that happens, that also can't fully be trusted because there's no way to verify it. But the list they release every few months, we have their name and ID number of all those killed. They're all in the Palestinian Population Registry, which Israel has access to. Israel does not deny the numbers released by the Ministry of Health. they actually rely on them. Not so Oedipus says, what do we know about the tunnel situation, the Gaza-Egypt border? It seems like there's some, well, it seems plausible that there's tunnels, because why wouldn't there be? There's great monetary incentive for whoever's on the Egyptian side to create a tunnel and be able to smuggle things in and out. So you would expect there to be some tunnel infrastructure. We do know, though, that one of the tunnels that they took a photo of and uploaded, Gallant admitted, I think it was Gallant admitted that was just like, it wasn't actually a tunnel. They just used it to, what was it, for leverage? I don't remember exactly what it was, but he acknowledged that it was a bullshit report. But yeah, I think it's plausible that there's some amount of tunnels. And what was the number? We've only dealt with a relatively small percentage of all the tunnels in Gaza. Milo says, what do you think the response will be from Israel? Probably more of the same. We'll hit another round. But it's interesting. I think this is important. Hanegbi is saying, that's a cabinet member, military force alone can't destroy Iran's nuke program. Well, if you can't destroy it, it just incentivizes that they actually move towards nuclear weapons. AG says the F-35 story is false. Yeah, I know, it's definitely bullshit. Oh, I see. I'm so backed up on the comments. Okay. Yeah, that video we saw is someone saying, "Is it in Iran?" It almost seems like that might be Iran. Sen makes a good point. Israel doesn't even have the right tactics, because every 20 years their problem gets exponentially worse. Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know about exponentially worse. Like the 72 Yom Kippur War was pretty bad, but the situation is definitely not getting better, and in many ways it's getting worse. Yeah. Are they not letting journalists into Gaza because of this? They claim they're doing it for their safety, but it seems like they don't want proper reporting on the ground with what's happening. I think if they let reporters in, there's going to be some pretty horrific things reported on. Dave says indirect deaths are significant here. Yeah, you say here. Are you in Gaza? Does that mean you're in Gaza or Israel or Palestine? So, yeah, indirect deaths. And those who watch all these streams, you might be bored of this already, but it's very hard to count because you don't always know what to attribute to indirect deaths. Like we do know that some number of young children died from cold and from malnutrition. These, we know we can count them as indirect deaths. They are not included in the 54,000 lines of 54,000 deaths we have. I actually checked those today on stream. They have not been added. So those are not included in the death toll, but those are easier cases to know. If somebody dies of a heart attack, you don't know if they otherwise would have died or if it was from stress or lack of malnutrition or whatever. So what you need to do is over the next few years, you need to see how many natural deaths there are in Gaza and see how many excess that is over the average. So a population of 2.2 million, you're expecting around 17,000 natural deaths a year. We might see that in the year 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, until things stabilize, that it wasn't 17,000, but in fact it was 35,000. Anything over 17,000 should be considered an indirect death. Yeah, AG, I'm glad you asked this. What are the think tanks rebuking the ratio based on minutes? Yeah, I've put out debunkings of all of that. You're talking about what Andrew Fox and Eisenberg do. I've thoroughly debunked all of this. You could come with any claim that you've heard about Ministry of Health, and I'll answer it. What they do, I'll tell you what they primarily do is, so one of the claims they said, oh, we saw that they reduced the ages of all these 18-year-olds to be 17-year-olds. They're trying to increase the number of children. Now, when you actually look at the changes, 80% of all ages were reduced by 1 year, including elderly, which were then moved to military age. And what happened was that was the April list to the May list. In April, their systems collapsed and they had to report data by hand. They didn't have their computer systems. And if you think about it, if you input only the year and not the month, it's actually going to make people older than they actually are. So then when they made the correction, it reduced the names. And the way you could see this is the number of 0-year-olds, because you can't have a -1-year-old. So if you look at the number of 0-year-olds in the April list relative to May, then you understand what happened. It was just they said, we can't report properly. We have problems with the issues. We're not putting out the list has problems, but it's the best we could do. And then they corrected it. But then the think tank says, you see, 18-year-olds moved to 17-year-olds. Why didn't they explain the full picture? And if the Ministry of Health was trying to fabricate, why change the ages? Why not put them as children to begin with? Or recently we heard them say they removed names from the list. If they're trying to inflate the numbers, why are they removing names? Why not add as many names as possible? They reviewed the names because they found errors in the list. They're literally going through great effort to make the list more accurate. They found some amount of errors. They removed them. So this effort they're going through to improve the accuracy of the list is then used as proof that there's fraud. But that's just complete bullshit. And you could even say that they're not trying to make the list accuracy from the goodness of their heart. They're doing it so Israel can't make a claim against them that they're fabricating, right? It's clearly incentives. It's clearly there's like a system of checks and balances here because Israel has a lot of intel about what's going on in Gaza and they have access to the Palestinian population registry. So this on its own can put pressure on the MOH to try to make the list as accurate as possible. But yeah, what these think tanks are saying, they haven't found any fraud. So you have this publicly available data under immense public scrutiny that Israel themselves have access to, and they found absolutely nothing. So feel free to keep throwing claims at me about what you've heard about the Ministry of Health. They're all complete bullshit. And none of these people have been willing to talk to me about it. I wrote an analysis that got hundreds of thousands of views and they just blocked me. Andrew Fox called me a capo and he blocked me. He refuses to debate. None of them are going to debate it because they know they can't. They know it's bullshit. They'll go on podcasts that ask them softball questions. They're not going to talk to somebody who actually knows this issue. Jonathan says, so if it were 2-to-1, would you say it wasn't genocide? Surely you would expect a higher than average given dense populations. So the average, I said 2-to-1, but it's actually 1.5 to 2-to-1. There's a range in the data because there's some deaths that you don't know if they're combatants or not. Now, the way to look at genocide is not simply the numbers themselves, it's certain actions being taken. And I don't actually care much for the terminology. Normally when I talk, I'm not saying genocide, and the reason I don't say genocide is just because I don't want to get into a debate on terminology. So I just describe it in other terms that are much harder to contest, like I say an atrocity or the mass killing of civilians, right? But when you look at like what Israel's done to Gaza, they have destroyed the way of life in Gaza. They have made Gaza an unlivable city. They have destroyed vital infrastructure from cropland to hospitals to power plants, water salination plants. This is what they're describing. This plus the just disregard for civilian life, this is what the scholars and the NGOs are describing as genocide. Now, words don't have objective meaning. The meaning is based on consensus. So right now you have a consensus amongst scholars, amongst human rights groups, and amongst a relatively significant portion of the population that is talking about this, that who can now, like, then it's a genocide, right? There's no objective meaning to this term. And when you look at the definition of genocide, and this is where a lot of people push back. They say, but Israel is not trying to exterminate the population entirely. That's a misconception that many people have about genocide. And we Jews, our frame of reference of genocide is the Holocaust, which was an attempt to exterminate an entire population. So I understand why our reference sees genocide as different. When you look at the definition of genocide, it says to destroy a group in whole or in part. In part's very subjective, but what they mean by that is a significant part. And again, I'm not one to say, oh, trust the experts. The experts can be wrong. But at the point when you just have all the scholars are in agreement here, all the scholars that are scholars on genocide are in agreement here, we see that there's not a double standard, because things with a lower death toll, a lower civilian to combatant ratio are also called genocide. There's no double standard, and there seems to be a consensus. Okay, you want to argue that it's just like it's not a genocide, go for it, but it's not a winning battle at this point. What I will say to those who don't like the term genocide, and I understand the reservation, because when people think genocide, they think intentional extermination of an entire population, and that's not what's happening. There right now is a publicly stated goal to ethnically cleanse the entire population. That is Israel's plan currently. So I do get that people don't like this term, but if you don't like the term, provide a term people can use. And you can't just say it's war, because people don't accept that, right? So I think this is one of the biggest flaws of the Hasbara community. They get so stuck on terminology, and they think they're like arguing in like the court of law and trying to win on a technicality. Well, it's technically not apartheid because it's not a different race, it's a different ethnicity, or it's not an apartheid because you have a judge in Israel that is this, right? It's like, guys, people are trying to describe something bad, and they're using the terms they have available to describe that reality. If you don't like them using that terms, give them a term they can use. But you can't say it's not occupation, it's us living on our ancestral homeland. It's not apartheid. It's just us protecting our population. It's not colonialism, it's just us returning home. It's not genocide, it's just war, right? When you frame actions that are unjust and immoral in a way that makes it sound perfectly acceptable, don't expect others to adopt this language. They're going to look for other language to describe this reality. And if you don't like the language they're using, give them another term to describe something bad. Don't try to whitewash it with this soft language that you're trying to use. So that's how I look at it. So, Jonathan, I hope that answers your question. And yeah, Jonathan, to continue real quick, you would expect a higher civilian to combatant ratio in Gaza, but 2 to 3 to 4 times higher, that's based on a series of bad decisions. Yes, so not so Oedipus says a couple of IDF soldiers invented a fake tunnel and then went into a report till Golan shut it down. Yeah. Okay, Gabriel Epstein, too, of the Washington Institute. So, AG, Gabriel Epstein is one of the most knowledgeable analysts on the Ministry of Health, and perhaps the only person I've ever met who has researched this more than myself. I could say we both have an ideological drive in a slightly different direction. The first report he put out, I was very critical of, and I did tell him that. He was right that there were issues with the data, but he completely glossed over the fact that even though there were issues with the data because their reporting system was not functioning, he didn't say that we can still somewhat rely on these numbers. But Gabriel's position now very clearly is the MOH numbers can be relied on. That's his position now. So Gabriel Epstein and I are in pretty much agreement at this state. In his last report he put out, he did say, and he never answered me on this, so I do want an answer. He did say that the data doesn't show such a bad civilian to combatant ratio. I would need him to explain that, because that's just not That's not based in the data. So I don't know where he reached that conclusion. But generally speaking, Gabriel Epstein, I do appreciate what he does. And just so you know, when Andrew Fox put out that sham of a report at Henry Jackson Society, Gabriel Epstein and Matthew Kronkal, whose history speaks on Twitter, put out an article challenging that report. So Epstein's actually took an interesting stance against Fox's report. So yeah, I want to give credit to Gabriel. He does good work. We agree now on a lot of things. I think there's one conclusion that we disagree on, and I'm still waiting for him to explain that to me. Yeah, so this is another thing. Like a lot, right? We see that the terminology ethnic cleansing is genocidal in nature. That's true, right? Like ethnic cleansing is considered a form of genocide. It's not the form of genocide that's exterminating an entire population, but it's in destroying a population's way of life. That's what genocide is. And I know that's not the connotation many people have, but that's how it's described today in simplest terms. Finally got to the bottom of the comments. Cool. Nice. Maybe we get a few more super chats in the mix. See what else we got. Let's see what's still happening in Discord. Is there still a conversation going on? There is. Nice. I don't want to... Okay. Sen says it's genocidal because we know what the overall goal of Israel is, wanting to settle the land in totality, reducing the population size that would be manageable to integrate into one state. Yeah, exactly. Israel, depending on how you want to define genocide, but Israel's stated goal to ethnically cleanse Gaza is genocide. And the Amalek speech, yep. He literally he sent the soldiers in on the back of a speech describing them as Amalek. One of the most irresponsible things I've seen. AG, is the average Israeli more right or left than the average American, in your opinion? I think it really depends on what topic. Like, if you're talking about how they feel like militarism and stuff like that, they're more right-wing by far. It's not even close. But I think probably it's possible on like economic policy, they're more to the left on average, a little bit more like socialist leaning. And then on social issues, no, because of the ultra-Orthodox and Palestinian citizens of Israel are quite conservative socially. If you exclude those populations, and Mizrahim are also more conservative, so no. No, socially also, I would say to the right. So I think probably only economic policy. See if we have any updates. Iran's foreign minister says calls for restraint are unjustified. Iranian official warns Israel against hitting vital infrastructure. IDF says it hit 2 air bases in Iran earlier today. Iran claims limited damage to Fordo, Ifshan nuclear sites after Israeli attack. Oh, is this a new attack? Because I thought those were not attacked. Okay. Iran's Atomic Energy Agency says there's limited damage to Fordo nuclear site south of Tehran, and another the damage was limited areas, did not cause any urban damage in the case of Fordo. Okay, interesting. Oh, by the way, is there like I forgot? Hold on. There's a setting here that I forgot you could do that's kind of cool, where you could have the chat be on the thing. Hold on. Do you guys hear that cricket? Is there a cricket in my house? I thought there was a way to have the live comments. Okay, whatever. What do you make when people say Amalek interpreted differently? I've seen the argument made that but don't know what the pop. Yeah, so yeah. The Bible is definitely not my area of expertise, but from what I've understood, Amalek, the nation of Amalek are mentioned twice. And once it's when they do something horrific to us, and then the second time we genocide them. So some have said Netanyahu wasn't referring to that passage when we genocided them, referring to the first passage. It doesn't make any difference. It's not. Amalek is still the people who the Jews genocided in the Bible, or I don't know if it's even the Jews, the ancient Israelites, who we are their descendants, but yeah, that's just that's just trying to find a loophole out of something entirely irresponsible. Because people don't say, "Oh yeah, he meant that verse. We should care for civilians." No, it creates a certain ethos before you send your soldiers in. AG says, "Why are Mizrahim so homophobic yet dressed like the gayest men on earth? Are they secretly Dominican?" That's hilarious. Okay, I'll put it this way. There's a style. There's a type of people in Israel who are referred to as Arsim. That would be pronounced Arsim. And you could kind of look at it as like what's described in American as a Guido, like those Italians with all the gel in their hair and they wear nice clothing. So Arsim is Israel's version of them, always looking for fights. It's kind of like an attitude. It's how you talk. But it's also, there's probably some racial element to it because Arsim are almost overwhelmingly Mizrahim. But you could be a Mizrahi that's not an Ars. Just generally, most Arsim do happen to be Mizrahi Jews. And for those who don't know, Mizrahi Jews are from Middle East. Although, we have this category. There's less categories in Israel for Jews for whatever reason, because you have Sephardi Jews, which are Spanish Jews, which moved then to North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia. And then you have Mizrahi, which means Eastern Jews, which is Iraq, Iran, you have some Lebanon, Libya, and you also have Yemen. But in Israeli society, they're all Mizrahim. That's the category for every Jew from North Africa and Middle East is Mizrahim. That's the category. And most Arsim happen to be Mizrahim. And they dress very nicely, but they're often considered like, they're not always lower class socioeconomically, but they're like less respected in society. And their dress style is what would be like metrosexual, like European fashion, tight shirt, shiny shoes. And it's funny because, many don't know this. I was one of Tel Aviv's top party promoters and club promoters and party producers for years. And Israel doesn't have a culture where you wait in line for whatever reason. There's no lines. It's just a fucking horde. And they do this at the club as well. And I think at the club it's more intentional because you're not allowed to not let somebody in unless they're not dressed a certain way. But a lot of the clubs in Israel, they don't want Arsim in there. And they have no way to not let them in based on dress. So if you have people waiting in a line, how do you reject somebody dressing real nice? You can't. So they don't have a line. Everybody hovers around the gate, waiting for the selector to say, "Hey, show me your ID," lets them in. And what the selectors will do, I'm giving some secrets of the Tel Aviv nightlife. They'll say a first name, let's say they got like the promoters are inside the club and they're texting the selector who to let in. Let's say the selector will get a text saying Ben Cohen. The selector will say Ben, and then Ben will raise his hand. He says, "What's your last name?" And let's say he says Cohen. She's like, "Okay, that's him," but she'll then decide if he's a fit. And if he's not, she's like, "Nope, not the right Ben. No, it's not Ben Cohen," even though it is. So that's kind of their trick to be able to decide if they want to let somebody in. And that's why I think my theory is one of the reasons why they don't have lines at clubs is because it's the only way they could reject people. And why are they homophobic? Look, I mean, they're probably as homophobic as the average Middle Easterner. I would say that the outliers in the Middle East are Ashkenazi Jews. Non-religious Ashkenazi Jews are the outlier in the Middle East in terms of homophobia, because on social issues, they're much closer to the average, like European or American, than they are the average Middle Easterner. Milo says, many Gazans are pissed off with Hamas, and many like Ahmed Fawad al-Khatib think Hamas is the main responsibility for their suffering. Why do you use this oppressor-oppressed narrative? I think, Milo, we still haven't fully seen eye to eye on this, but you keep asking me questions that make me feel like you don't fully understand my approach here. Oppressor-oppressed narrative is relevant because the more power one has, the more responsibility they should have. Okay? It's not, I know it sounds cliche, but with power comes responsibility is very important, because irresponsible power is one of the most dangerous things imaginable. What's more dangerous? An irresponsible criminal or an irresponsible nuclear power? These are worlds apart. Okay? That's one. Two, more powerful entities normally have a greater capacity to impact change. Israel can do a whole lot. Hamas, what they can do, they could impact change only by kind of giving up and surrendering, just accepting the conditions for as is and taking a different route, which I'm not saying they shouldn't, but it's not like you're essentially saying if they don't surrender, Israel can just keep oppressing them. So I think it's nuanced, but to ignore power dynamics and to think that the more responsible person can reasonably act as reckless as an entity that's much less powerful. And again, this whole thing, main responsibility for suffering, this isn't, I'm not here for competition and blame. That's never been my, well, I blame is interesting because I'm all about like accountability, and in a sense I blame Israel for many things, but this isn't about who's more to blame. I many times say both Israel and Hamas are complicit in the mass killing of the Palestinian people. The argument of who's more to blame means absolutely nothing to me. They're both responsible for mass murder. You know, let's say you want to say you think Hamas is more responsible. Does that mean where does that bring us? Does that mean Israel can keep dropping bombs on civilians in Gaza? Like, what do we achieve here? I'm interested in solutions. Who can bring us solutions? Hamas can bring us solutions if they surrender. Who can cause them to surrender? Who has leverage over them? The U.S. doesn't. You don't have leverage over your enemy. You have leverage over your ally. So yeah, if you're not going to accept power dynamics, then in my opinion, you're just not fully living in reality. You know, what's worse? What's worse? A criminal that for no reason murders somebody, or a cop that does the same thing? In a sense, they're equally bad because they both committed murder, but The second you have an agent of an institution that's paid by taxpayer money, right? Like, you could see why a dirty cop that's committing murder is. I'm not sure this is the best example because they're each killing one person, so maybe it's not the best example. But like, when Hamas acts, I don't even want to say recklessly, but when they lash out violently, they kill 1,200 civilians. Israel lashing out violently has killed 60,000. Hamas does not have capability to kill that amount of people. So how can we even describe this in the same terms? Not so. Oedipus says, awesome, like the people of Northern England. Are you talking about the chavs? Like or are you talking? No, you might be talking about a pikey. A pikey, I think, is Northern England. Like, they're gypsy types. I think the English version is called a chav. They sound okay. It's because I'm slow on comments. I sometimes go back and forth between topics. I hope this isn't too annoying. Yeah, exactly. Not Oedipus. They are chavs. Let's see. Elian says, do you think Ahmed is a good representative of the Palestinian people? I feel he is too pro-Abrahamic Accords, which didn't give enough concessions for Palestinians. I think Ahmed, and he will be on again, that's Ahmed Fawad Al-Khatib, who was just on Jubilee, which we reviewed yesterday, but YouTube took it down for copyright issues. But I think that his vision and attempt to build a peaceful Palestinian resistance movement is commendable and needed. I wholeheartedly support him. I think, though, that he is, at least in the Jubilee episode, he was seemingly resistant to give legitimate criticism of Israel. And I think that is making him not a good representative because Palestinians aren't trusting him. Many Palestinians see him as just a shill for Israel now. So his movement that he wants to build, I wholeheartedly support. The way he's positioning himself, I don't think is correct to be able to effectively build this movement. I think he's positioned himself to compel Israelis more than he's positioned himself to compel Palestinians. But if that's the case, then he's not going to be able to build this movement. So I wish him success, and I'll support him on this endeavor. But I think he needs to change his positioning a little bit. He needs to be more honest in his critique of Israel. Like, what did he say? He said October 7th destroyed Gaza. So he has no problem blaming Hamas on destroying Gaza. Today he said, I'm happy Iran got attacked because they destroyed Gaza. So he's blaming Iran on destroying Gaza. Okay, so if you're able to blame Iran and Hamas, you could also blame Israel. You clearly could see that more than one party could be responsible. Okay, so blame Israel. That goes a long way. But he was very resistant to taking that point for whatever reason. Have you looked into the Fagelin sphere? No, what is that? I have no idea what the Fagelin sphere is. Sen says Ahmed is a propagandist. He's literally paid by the military-industrial complex. His salary comes from the Atlantic Council. No, so is the Atlantic Council? Is that like a pro-war publication? Interesting. So I've never looked into the Atlantic Council, but depending on their reputation, if they're generally like taking the neoconservative position of like regime change and intervention and this and that, I think that you can make the case that that's influencing him to some extent. But yeah, so Fafalo saying he criticizes both sides. That's true. On Twitter, he's definitely criticized the war crimes Israel's committed, for sure. On Twitter, I've seen him be more balanced than what he was on Jubilee for whatever reason. But I'll have him on. I'll ask him about that. Basically, saying he's basically rifting for Zionist donations. Oh yeah, and another point about Ahmed. Yeah, like, great. We want Palestinians to criticize Hamas. Great. And the coalition he wants to build, great. But again, he very clearly we're seeing, and again, this doesn't even need to be my opinion. Let's just see how the markets are reacting, right? The markets being the crowd. How do Palestinians currently perceive him? Based on that, we can know that he hasn't positioned himself well to effectively build this movement. But he may have positioned himself well. I mentioned to convince Israelis, but maybe he's also positioned himself well to be hired by the Atlantic Council. I'm not sure, but we'll have him on. I emailed. We chatted over email yesterday, and it'll be sometime next week probably. Milo Sabri says Hamas can impact change in the same way Gandhi did. They do have a lot of power as the weak side, and they have 100% agency. They can choose how to react. So I actually made this case yesterday. I think that they do, but let's say they don't. Does that absolve Israel of responsibility? Right? Because Hamas is paying consequences of being irresponsible. Hamas is designated as a terror organization that's sanctioned by the world. Israel is supported and funded by the West. To think that that doesn't come with the standards. So they could, but they don't. Now what? Right? Like, it's not, we need to grapple with reality for what it is. The reality is the overwhelming majority of resistance groups have not been like Gandhi. Gandhi is the outlier. He's the exception to the rule. Overwhelmingly, resistance against a more powerful enemy, 9 out of 10, or maybe 99 out of 100 is better to say, is violent. So we can hope that Hamas becomes an outlier like Gandhi, yes. It's not a realistic expectation. It would, again, make them an outlier. And you can't say, because Hamas is not acting as an outlier, Israel is allowed to do whatever they want to do. Let me even just elaborate on this point, because I think it's important. Humans respond to their environments. And again, you have outliers. But if you oppress a people, very rarely are they just going to accept their oppressor. Some amount are going to, maybe some amount will still be peaceful and loving. And I actually know a fair amount of Palestinians that are like that. I interact with them all the time, who are just all about nonviolence and peace. It's also worth mentioning that Israel has stifled nonviolent resistance consistently. They arrest nonviolent protesters. They've shut down nonviolent protests. They've engaged violently against nonviolent protests. The first Intifada was primarily nonviolent, and it was met with serious force from Israel. So the Palestinian Gandhi is either in jail or has been killed. And then Isra Amro is also an example of a Palestinian Gandhi. He lives in Hebron, and he's constantly harassed by settlers who the IDF protects. Okay? But you can't expect an entire system to act like outliers. Like, again, we need to grapple with reality. So certain conditions produce certain results. Saying you have 100% agency doesn't negate this, because again, the majority will never be outliers. That just makes no sense. they're going to act as humans generally act in those situations. And then you can't. So essentially, Israel imposes conditions on Palestinians that will almost certainly cause some amount of Palestinians to be violent. And then Israel uses that violence as an excuse to impose more conditions that will lead to more violence. And then we say, why don't they love us? Why don't they accept us? So we'll continue to be violent towards them. This doesn't work. Aside from it being morally depraved, clearly it doesn't work. The Palestinian population today is more extreme than it's ever been. How? Why? Do we want to say it's simply their education system? No, it's their experience. It's waiting at checkpoints. It's being humiliated. It's having family members killed or arrested. And yeah, the education system matters, but again, the education system is simply reinforcing their everyday experience. Ahmed also criticized Israel and settlers on the Jubilee. Yeah, I actually didn't watch this. I watched the first 2/3, so maybe I didn't see that part. He's not trying to represent Palestinians. He has his opinions, just like you have yours. Most Israel. Okay, no, fair. I mean that's fine, but I mean just how my opinions are out there for people to criticize, so are his. Dave says if Israel wants Gandhi, release Marwan Barghouti. Yeah, he's the most popular Palestinian leader. He's more popular than any non-jailed leader currently. He is guilty of some stuff, but again, who isn't? Another terrorist turned statesman, right? Most, I don't know if we could say most anymore. Yeah, most of Israel's leaders have engaged in some shady behavior. So yeah, I think we should let him out and maybe make a condition that there's no way to enforce him to keep it, but say, look, we're going to let you out, but you just gotta rein it in. We're going to recognize a Palestinian state, and you just need to lead this movement that a Palestinian state is stable and doesn't want to take more land after the fact and try to work with him. I think it's possible. Okay, Senate saying the Atlantic Council is pro-war. Interesting. Okay, interesting. I mean, I do think a nonviolent, critical thinking over doctrine says, what role can a nonviolent approach work? So I was thinking about this a little bit yesterday. One of the things that made the American Civil Rights Movement effective was it the March on Montgomery, where they were crossing the bridge and the police brutalized them, and it put the brutality of the police on display for other Americans to see, and that strengthened their movement. And it was nonviolent on their part, but it brought about the violence of the oppressor, right? So many people say that Hamas's strategy was not to defeat Israel militarily, it was to invite them in to destroy Gaza and shift public opinion against them, as well as get some prisoners released. So if their goal is to shift public opinion by showing how evil and violent Israel is, there is a way they could do that non-violently, and they've done it in the past, right? The Great March of Return, which was, what was the number? How many was it? 7th? Hold on, I might be way off, so let me check this real quick. How many at March of Return? Most saw 10,000 participants. On some occasions, numbers exceeded 50,000, right? So this was in 2018. Hamas organized the March of Return, where anywhere from 10 to 50,000 Palestinians approached the border. Now, while I say this is peaceful, that amount of people breaching the border very well may not be peaceful, right? So it's not that Israel can just allow that to happen. They will need to find a way to stop these people from walking. But if you want to put Israeli violence on display without Palestinians themselves needing to be violent, then you could do a yearly March of Return. Every year, do a March of Return, tens of thousands walking towards the border with signs, even it could be white flags, we want peace, whatever, nothing violent, nothing harmful. I think that would go a long way in raising awareness of the Palestinian cause without turning some people off of it because of the violence, right? Because violence turns people off of a cause. October 7th radicalized a fair bit of people against not only Hamas, but the Palestinian cause in general. So I think that's a way to do it. West Bank Palestinians can also, do this. Palestinian citizens of Israel can also, both West Bank Palestinians and Palestinian citizens of Israel can engage in some amount of civil disobedience, like not going to work, maybe blocking roads, doing marches to Jerusalem, marching to the border. This will be responded to with violence, right? Less violence than had they, it would be met with less violence than had they been violent. So you are reducing the violence from Israel, but you are really building this peaceful movement that would create waves. So I think there's certainly ways to do it. Sen, thank you so much for the €5. Wait, is that euros? Or I always confuse the pound and euro symbol. No, that's euros, right? Right, it's an E, and God, it's need a B. Oh no, but the pound is also an E. Wait, that is a pound. I don't fucking know anymore. Okay. Thank you, Sen, so much for the £5 or euros. Similar exchange rate. Keep up the good work, is what Sen said. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's pounds. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I like to think of myself as a man of the world who's traveled a lot, and yet I can't identify that symbol. And Mehdi, thank you for 14 Canadian dollars. I know what that means. Hi, Ador. Always a pleasure to watch your videos. I'm curious, without ulterior motive, do the airport agents give you problems when you enter Israel because of your channel? So first of all, thank you so much for the super chat. I have never had issues coming in or going out. This time when I returned a few months ago, I was a little bit concerned because I did some controversial stuff like the analysis about the Bebas cause of death and some other analyses, but no, I'm not. It doesn't. And even I posted something on Facebook, and some guy I used to promote the clubs with messaged me, said, "You're a piece of shit. I reported you to the Shin Bet, which is Israel's FBI." Which I didn't take as a serious threat, but I told him, I said, "You're dumb, because if they arrest me, then I'll just lean into that and make content and amplify my message if they arrest me." When you arrest somebody for doing activism, you make them a martyr of sorts. So it would be a tactical mistake for Israel to do anything to me. They would only amplify my message. Also, when you come in, you don't need to check customs. You just have a biometric passport. You scan your passport, and you don't even talk to somebody if you have an Israeli passport. Now, granted, if I was flagged in the system, it's possible that it wouldn't scan and they tell you to go to a desk and then they'd question you. That's possible, because during COVID, I had a little incident. I was meant to fly, and then I took the PCR test and I came back positive, but I had a strong sense it was a false positive because I had gotten COVID like a month prior. And I know it's impossible to get it twice in a month, and I know false positives do happen, and I had no symptoms. So I got an antigen test, and that came back negative. So I showed up to the airport with the antigen test, but I was flagged in the system as having COVID, which I did not think their system was that organized. So they sent me to isolation. They didn't let me fly. They sent me to isolation for 5 days. After 5 days, I had to come to the airport for a police interrogation, which I enjoy. I got interrogated for 3 full days by the military police when I was in the IDF, which I also enjoyed because I saw it as like a game. Who will get better, the best of who, and I feel like I won that one against them. So this was years later with the COVID incident. I was already experienced and versed at dealing with these interrogations. And granted, the airport police interrogator is not nearly as sharp as military police interrogators. So he, after the interrogation, is like, okay, you could go. You might get a court date. Didn't hear anything from them. And then just last year, my bank told me that I have a freeze on my account. I'm like, why would I have a freeze? They're like, you owe money. I'm like, to who? And they're like, oh, you owe 5,000 shekels, which is around $1,250 to whatever agency for the COVID thing. So they fined me. No court. They just decided to fine me. So that's fucked up. Motherfuckers. Let's see. But yeah, I did end up sitting in military prison for 10 days. Par says, is it true 20 casualties from Iran ballistic missiles? If by casualties meaning injuries as well. What I saw was 7. Right? There's a misconception. People often think casualty is a death, but a casualty is a death or an injury. It were 35 injured. So that would mean 35. 35 casualties. Well, this judge denies release request for pro-Palestinian activist Khalil. Why are they still holding him? Like, how did the U.S. go so authoritarian? That's crazy. That's bonkers. He didn't commit a crime. What crime did he commit? IDF releases footage of interception of Iranian drone. Oh, let's check this one out. Okay. Look at that little propeller in the back. Interesting. Looks relatively easy to shoot down. Yeah, the drones, none of them made it. They shot 100. They were all shot down. Milo says, imagine a Martin Luther King convincing Palestinian leader insisting, I have a dream, a strong vision of stoic peace-based identity instead of insisting in eternal violence, victimization-based identity. Takes a strong leader. Again, but Milo, you're describing two of the most brilliant and notable nonviolent leaders in history who I agree with you very much. That would be great. But that's, again, you can't keep oppressing a population until they produce something that is almost never produced. It just that's not a realistic way to solve any problem. It's just not. I could imagine. I wish for it every day, but I'm not going to support killing and oppressing a population because they don't have a Martin Luther King. And as far as we know, we killed their Martin Luther King, or he's currently sitting in jail because Israel does systematically stifle nonviolent resistance. Right. Census people act as if blowing themselves up was the first thing Palestinians thought of. No, yeah, the first thing they thought of was primarily nonviolent. Tel Aviv hit by an Iranian missile. You're not scared. Well, first of all, I'm in the Galilee. But no, I'm not scared. Not even a little bit. And it's all just a matter of statistics. And look, I know fear is not rational, right? It's like we're often scared even irrationally, but at least in this regard, I'm able to keep a rational mind and think of the statistics. So we've had 35 injuries in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv has a population of around, 700,000? Do the math, you know. Right. Even let's take it to an extreme. 1,000 people in Tel Aviv die. So that would mean that I would have a 1 in 700 chance of dying, which is actually pretty high. But still, it's, you know, we're talking about a 0.125% or something, you know. And that's in a very extreme case. And even me, I'm in the north in Ma'alot, which, you know, Hezbollah was shooting rockets here. There was a rocket hit a building in the next town over, but no. If anything, I feel more fear on a plane whenever the takeoff, and I've flown so many times, the takeoff, for whatever reason, I get light butterflies in my stomach. And I know that, again, I know the statistics that it's the safest way of travel. They said you need to fly for 24/7 for 1,000 years, and then you'll have a 50% chance of dying. Something crazy like that. But for whatever reason, the going up, and then it goes up, and then it stalls for a minute, and there's that little thing. Every time, I'm like, okay, we're dead. And granted, I take breaks when I'm smoking weed. Like sometimes I smoke weed more consistently. Other times I'll take a break for a few months. But there's often when I go to the airport, I go very high just because it's more fun. It's like, it makes the whole experience, security becomes kind of scary. It's like this whole adventure. Then you're past security and you get to eat food while you're waiting, and then you're on the plane. But it definitely increases the anxiety factor for sure. Life gets boring, you know. So you add a little risk. If you check out the video I uploaded yesterday, I got lost in the Bethlehem Mountains. That was also like pushing some boundaries for excitement. That one, I would say it's possible my risk assessment was a little bit off. Like it's possible what I did there was a little bit dangerous. I don't know how to assess that risk, but you should check it out. It was uploaded yesterday. It's like a 13-minute clip of me walking through the Bethlehem Mountains, not really knowing where I'm going. All right, Milo, we're just not going to see eye to eye on this. Blaming Israel is so much easier. Palestinians should choose responsibility. I'm about existing in reality. It's not about what's easier. It's about what's more realistic. They should choose responsibility. Asking an entire collective to have a shift, a shift in their collective, to change their culture. A culture is an emergent system. If you're part of a culture, you're influenced by it. How could one individual change an entire culture? Milo, I really think your understanding of human nature and psychology is just not, it's just not quite there. And I like you. Like I'm not trying to be a dick, but like this idea saying, don't blame Israel, a government, an institution, tell a people to change, tell an oppressed people to change their way to fix their oppression. That is crazy. That's crazy. Like our ability to pressure an institution to change is probably 1,000,000 times more likely to happen than expecting an entire population to transform and accept their oppressor. There's not even living in reality. It's not even like we should try to build these movements, but this whole idea that Israel's absolved of responsibility and we only put immense pressure on Israel to make changes and just tell Palestinians to transform their entire culture and their entire way of seeing things, and the humiliation and oppression they faced every day since the day they were born, but yet find a way to accept them. Is it possible? Sure. Is it probable? Very much not so. Very much not so. It's as unrealistic of saying like, don't blame anti-Semites. Just tell Jews to be different people. You know. Oh, it's not the Nazis. It's not. It's not. It's so easy to blame the Nazis, but how come Jews were going to things like capitalism on one hand, and on the other hand, communism, the Bolsheviks, right? We were dominating these industries that gave us a certain reputation. Why were we doing that? Why can't we all change? Why not just tell all the Jews to assimilate? It's just they have agency. This isn't serious stuff. It's not. It's just not a serious way to look at it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And just so you know, anti-Semites have that expectation. It's just assimilate. Just don't be Jews. Just why do you need to be different? You know, why do you guys like? You know, there's nothing. I don't want to say there's nothing of value at looking at it that way, because two things can be true. Focusing on institutions to change and trying to build a movement from within. But this idea that your solution, that's where the solution will come from. And until then, oppression is okay, is not an acceptable way to look at it, in my opinion. Let's see what we got. If there's any updates. Jesus was crazy at the time. Everyone told him he wasn't living in reality, and Jesus was possible. I don't understand why you think extraordinary things cannot be possible and push for. Milo, you're actually not listening. I keep saying it's possible. You describe it as extraordinary thing. Extraordinary things are uncommon. So what you're saying is the oppression Israel does is okay. Which needs to happen is something extraordinary, something very unrealistic, very unlikely, nearly impossible. Some transformation needs to happen, and that's the solution. Brother, on this channel, we deal with reality. Okay? That's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do. Critical thinking over doctrine says, so missiles are getting through the Iron Dome. What does this mean for Israel? Yeah, it's not the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome does more like short-range missiles. This is the Arrow, and I believe the Patriot as well deals with the long-range ones. And yeah, we saw that last time too. They work, but they're overwhelmed. If you shoot a lot, they can't take them all down. So that's what we're seeing. Let's see if there's any more updates, and then I'll start winding down. It's already midnight over here. So yeah, we are hearing that the U.S. was informed before the strikes. This we're seeing. It's funny, yesterday on stream, somebody asked me what the likelihood of a unilateral strike is. And I said possible, but not likely. This was just yesterday. And then I woke up to a strike. But I guess it was not unilateral. So, well, does that count as unilateral? I guess it was unilateral, but it wasn't. It was with permission. Let's see what's happening on Twitter. Let's see. Yeah, I don't understand how this world works and how algorithms work, but like the people who blow up on Twitter and who I'm constantly being shown are so uninteresting and simply put, like dumb. Like, why do I need to see all this Brianna Wu content? She's gone like super Hasbara. I've never seen her say anything interesting or intelligent on Israel Palestine. Literally a 16-year-old can write more interesting stuff. Why do the algorithms work this way? Bringing Jesus into this debate is wild. He's so unique. We changed year numbering around his birth. Yeah, like Jesus is like a once in a many millennia person, you know? What interrogation techniques were they using? The military police. So what they suspected me for was use of cannabis. Somebody snitched on me, and they come in. They're very nice to you. I was also a lone soldier, which is when you don't have. My parents now live in Israel, but at the time they were still in the U.S. So I was a lone soldier, and you get like a special status. You get a higher salary. At the time, what do you get? Instead of $170 a month, you got $350 a month. Woo, balling. But they respect lone soldiers because lone soldiers, you know, they have it harder, and many of them volunteer to go there. They moved to Israel to join the IDF. I was one of those people. I was uber Zionist. And they're so nice. You're like, oh man, they're like, we don't want to get you in trouble. You're a lone soldier. You came here to serve. Just tell us what happened, and you'll be on your way today. But if you tell them what happened, they charge you. And the way the army works is if you say I smoked 10 times, that's 10 charges. Every time you smoke, there's another charge. And then how much of the story am I allowed to say? Whatever, fuck it, I don't care. I didn't agree to any of that. I said, yeah, I'm being honest with you. I smoked in high school, but not in the army. And then they're like, yeah, but we have a confession here from your friend. He explicitly said, it's right here. I said, can I see it? It's like, we can't show you until the officer comes later. So they're lying. They said my friend snitched on me when he didn't. And then they left and came back, and one of them came back very angry. I'm like, so I identified good cop, bad cop, and I called them out. I'm like, I see you've moved to the good cop, bad cop technique. Interesting. And they were hating the game I was playing with them. The friend that they said snitched on me, he didn't snitch on me, but he did get taken in a few days before me. And I suspected after they took him in that it might come for me next because we'd been smoking together. So what I did when I showed up to base the following week, I had a little Visine bottle that I put bleach in it, and I tied it in my boxers because if you put a drop of bleach in your pee for your pee test, it comes up inconclusive. So they took me in and gave me the pee test. Like sure enough, they were waiting for me on base, took me in, got the P test, came up inconclusive, and then the interrogation started. But so they were doing that, and then they would like leave for like 30 minutes at a time. So I just get bored and come back and yell at me, or come back and try something new. And they're like, okay, we're taking you for a lie detector. And I was just super chill and nonchalant, not getting angry, not getting worked up. At one moment, what did I put my feet on the table, and she's like, take your feet off the table. I said, why? You can't do anything to me about that. Right? Like shit like that. I was just being a major dick. One time I said, I want you to bring me lunch and a cigarette. And they said, no. I said, okay, well, I'm going to put my head down on the table, and I'm not responding to anything you say until then. So I just put my head on the table, pretended to sleep. And she's yelling at me, grilling me for like 10 minutes. And then she leaves and comes back with a cigarette and lunch. Yeah, good times, good times. Eventually, though, my friend that got taken in before me, there were 3 separate days of interrogations, 3 drug tests, all of which I cheated in different ways, actually. There's different ways to pass these tests, but I sent my friend got tipped off that they're coming to take him in by his commander. And he said, hey, they're coming to take me in. What should I do? So I told him a trick to come out clean on the test. And if you just flush your system with so much water that you're peeing like straight water, then it dilutes it to an extent that it doesn't show up. So I texted him that, and they took his phone and had that text. So eventually they got me on disturbing an interrogation, and I did sit 10 days. Yeah, but that was a good experience too, It's a military prison. SRG says, you sound like you were a troublemaker. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I joined the Army was because I was a big troublemaker growing up. Like, they didn't even let me walk at my high school graduation because I caused so much trouble. I started a rebellion against the administration. They used to call me Ador Nation. That was my nickname. At the parties, they would cheer, Ador Nation, Ador Nation. Da, da. Yeah, that was it was a whole thing. Yeah. Now I guess I still think I have a little bit of that rebel, but it's a rebel with the cause. Just put that energy towards positive means. And if you're gonna at least be wild, don't harm anybody along the way. I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb. Like, I think we all have some darkness in us, so you just got to find healthy ways to channel it. Dark humor, there's ways. Senses, how good is the weed in Israel? It's gotten great. Back in the day, back until I think in the 2010s, we saw a stark increase with medical marijuana starting to be legal here and becoming more common, because Israel has a great agriculture scene. Like, we're great at growing stuff. So the second medical marijuana became a thing, we started really focusing on quality. Before then, you'd get that swagger, you'd get hash imported from Lebanon. A lot of it was actually Hezbollah stuff. We'd be smoking that Hezbollah hash. But now you're getting stuff that I would say maybe is comparable to the United States, though probably not the variety. Like, when you go to the dispensary and you have all that stuff, it's not to that extent here, but it's developed. It's also decriminalized now. That's pretty yeah. So back to serious topics. I gave you guys a little bit about my background that I don't talk about all too often on stream, but Imagination says that's pretty interesting. What about their questioning style? Some say they use special trained techniques. Well, that's what they used on me, but I remember being compelled by not their bad cop, but their kindness was compelling. I don't think I was close to confessing, but I'm like, wow, I trust them. I like these people at the beginning. Like, I felt that their kindness was compelling. And then when I was in prison, I saw that 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 confessed. So they're very good at getting confessions out of people. almost everybody I met in there gave a confession. Yeah. Hairlot Mama says, what's your take on Iran's ability to defend itself? I don't think it's that great, honestly. I don't think that their anti-air capability is enough to stop Israel, as we're clearly seeing. Their ability to strike back, I think they do. So retaliation they have, but I think that's also relatively limited. But in terms of defending themselves and stopping Israel's assault, I don't think they have all too much to do there. Okay, maybe we'll do 2 more questions. If anybody wants to finish it off with the fun little super chat, we'll do that. And then we'll call it a night. But maybe I'll do another one, another stream tomorrow with the head-on community. Also, guys, look, we do conversations every single day. There's been a conversation on Discord now for hours. Hours it's been going on. And I want you all to join. It's such a good crew. Israelis, Palestinians, voices all over the world. For the most part, we keep it respectful. Lots of discussion. There's text channels. There's voice channels. It's a whole thing. There's been this few-hour conversation happening right now. We're speaking there. They're speaking there. Look at the link. It's also in the description here below. Ghazi Razik says, Ador, you are a great human. Listening to you is a therapy for me. Thank you. Palestinian refugee living in Pennsylvania, USA. Thank you, Razi. I really appreciate saying that. And I hope to see a day when you could return to your land, whether it's just to visit or whether you want to move there. Hope that day comes. Dave Pendre, thank you so much for the £2. Wait, no. Is that euro pounds? Damn. Okay, I'm going to study the difference. They're so similar. Do sirens keep you up at night? Thanks for the chat. There was supposedly look, I'm generally a light sleeper, but last night's siren, there's supposedly a siren last night that I did not wake up to, so not sure. I do when I'm sleeping, I have this like relaxing sleeping music, so maybe it drowned it out a little bit. But yeah. So far, I haven't been kept up at night all too much. Not all too much. Difference between euro and pound symbol. Are they that similar? Or is this just in my mind? Okay. They're different enough that I should not be getting this shit confused. What's the mental note to make? E. Okay, the euro is just an E. And the pound is also an E. Okay, the euro has 2 lines. Wait. Hold on. Guys, we're doing this research together. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Euro has 2 lines. Pound. Wait. Pound also has 2 lines. The fuck? Hold on. I'm seeing conflicting information. Okay. The pound is the euro is like a C with a line, and then the pound is some squiggly shit. I got this from here on out. Never will I be confused again. Sometimes all it takes is once to take a mental note. You could live your whole life not knowing, and then wait, but now what you said, this doesn't look like what I just saw. That's a pound, though. Okay, I know my currencies do that. Pound is like an I, an L. But Serge, look up. Is that not a pound symbol? Or is that a... This is some of the dumbest I've ever felt in my whole entire life right now. YouTube should just convert it all to dollars. That's true, but maybe it's just an opportunity to learn different currency symbols. Not that that will really come in handy ever, but hey. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see if we could do one more. It's like an L with a line in the middle. That's the pound. L with I don't know. Okay. Yeah, but it's like an L with a curved top. Doesn't quite look like an L, you know? But yeah, the euro is a C with 2 dashes. Cool. We got this shit. We got this shit. Awesome, guys. So yeah, again, hope to join Discord. We're doing conversations every night. And then I think tomorrow, probably what we're going to do is we're going to do a group call on Discord that we're going to stream to YouTube. So it's going to be like a fun little community chat. So whether you're on the chat talking, on the chat listening, or viewing from here, I'd love to see you there. Thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully things de-escalate soon enough. Much love from the Western Galilee.